This conference will now be recorded.
All right, everyone, good evening and welcome to our first College Knowledge Night. My name is Mr. Ngat. For those of you that don't know me, Ms. Martesini and I are our two college counselors here at BL. We're here to help you with anything that you might need college related. Like I said, this is the first College Knowledge Night of the year. We look forward to having a few more of these throughout the year. But we're really excited for tonight for what makes a competitive applicant. We know we have students that are seniors, juniors, sophomores, freshmen, all signed up, and I really feel it's pertinent to everybody, no matter what stage you're at in the process. We're lucky to be joined tonight by two of my favorite people in the world of college admissions, Clint Brown from Tennessee and Brad Durchslag from Trinity in San Antonio. So, gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Clint, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening, everybody. Again, as Mr. Ringget mentioned, my name is Clinton Brown. I am with the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, Tennessee. National champions. Let's go. And this is my wonderful colleague, Brad. We're going to talk a little bit tonight about what makes a competitive applicant. We're going to cover quite a few different things, from the different types of review that schools do to what that looks like, the deadlines and everything else. Again, like Mr. Ringget said, if you have questions, please, please, please put them in the chat. We will have a Q&A session a little bit later. But all right, let's get started. So what makes a competitive applicant? So one of the first things to really, and I know that this is something that you'll find as you go through these college knowledge nights or speak to us when we come to your high school at a fair or a visit, is that it's going to be different for every college and university. Your two things that are really important when looking at it and figuring out what might make you competitive at a particular institution is what is that school's priorities? What do they value the most when it comes to their applications, the students they bring in? What are they looking for specifically? And how do they make their decisions? Um, Another thing is going to be the type of review that they use. A holistic review, which a lot of you may have heard of, some of you may have not, and we'll go over that in a minute, and assured. Brad, what else would you like to add to that?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun when Clint and I were getting together to do this presentation for us to take a moment and zoom out of uh, we'll get to the decision deadlines and all that fun stuff, but taking a moment just to zoom out and say, what are things that students can do right now? And we'll talk about that as far as getting your application ready. And I say that I know there's freshmen, sophomore, junior, seniors in the room. There's things you can at least be thinking about now. But one of the things that Clint and I kept talking about was there are some things that are out of your control. And that's why we talked about those institutional priorities that each year the universities you're applying to may have different things that they're looking for. And one of the things I like to joke about is that universities do things similar and different enough just to be annoying. And that can be very complicated. And what I encourage you all to do is create some sort of Google Doc, Google Sheets that will have all the schools you're looking at and keeping track of some of the things that we're going to be highlighting today, just like the type of review, holistic versus assured, which I think we'll talk about the next slide. But Clint and I have been doing this for years, and so it's fun to talk through this of things that you can do and takeaways from this.
Absolutely. And I think it's also important to know when we say institutional priorities, we mean any given year a school is looking for very specific things when they build their class. Some years it may be we haven't had students from this part of the country or this state very often, and so we want to pull a few more of those. We need students in this particular major. We want this academic threshold. If you look for some highly selective schools or very competitive programs, they may want you to have a very high test score or a very high GPA. And also those are the type of some schools are looking for that big service aspect or looking more at your extracurriculars or might weigh your essay more heavily than others. And so these are questions that you can ask the admissions rep of any university that you're looking at, and we would highly encourage you to do so. Um, as Fred mentioned, going to the types of review, we talked about assured and holistic. The first one we'll go over is assured admission. Some of you might have heard it as guaranteed. Schools will typically have a threshold for this admission decision. You can look online, you can look in their brochure, and you can say, oh, if I meet this academic mark, whether it's GPA only or GPA and test score, I'm admitted. I don't have to worry about anything else. It's GPA, testing, and or class rank. You guys are used to that here in Texas when it comes to that. At the same time, though, they may still hold a holistic review for some subset of the application pool. Maybe if you didn't meet the mark in one of them. Maybe if you have the high GPA, but the test score is a little low, they'll review everything holistically with assured admission.
I like that. For both of ours, we're holistic review. So we're kind of looking at the assured admissions and not wearing that hat of the admissions counselor. But things I have heard are things like Clint just said, if you meet this GPA, we don't need a test score. Or if you have this test score, the GPA isn't factors as much. And those are the great questions to be asking the colleges that have this assured admissions of what that looks like. The wrinkle to some of those, or the caveat might be, right, Clint, that I might be top 10% admitted, but that's different to maybe to the university, but not to the major of my choice. So those are those other questions that you want to start digging into of what does that assured admissions mean?
Absolutely, yeah. And going on to the next one, it's holistic admission. This is one, as Brad mentioned, that we are both holistic review schools, which means that we're going to evaluate each application individually. We may not have a minimum mark for you to hit. If you look on the University of Tennessee's website, you're not going to find I must have this GPA, I must have this test score to be admitted. We don't have that because we're looking at everything in your application. We're going to use everything that you submit. Like we mentioned earlier with the institutional priority, some schools put different weight on different things. At the University of Tennessee, we put a little more weight on your academics than some schools might. And decisions are often finalized by a committee, again, which means there are multiple people reading your application, multiple people making a decision on whether you should be admitted to the university itself or even to your program that you want to do.
I like that, Clinton. I like the talking about that. This is year 12 for me in admissions with Trinity University, and over those years, I've seen our acceptance rate go from about 64% to this past year we were 24%. And I don't say that to brag. I say that for the context of before it was two of the three of you would be admitted. Now one of the four might be, and so that's where this holistic review comes in, and we'll talk a lot about how to unpack that. But it's the things that you can do now and those things that you can control, because there are a lot of factors. And we'll talk later about that with your application, your essay, your extracurriculars, the transcript and test scores if you choose to submit those. We'll talk about test option a little bit. But that holistic review really gives us a whole picture to paint of who this student is. Then, just like you said, we present your file to the admissions committee and a decision is made with 10, 12 of us making that admissions decision. And so you'll see as we go through this, there are ways to advocate for yourself that we can then use that information to help advocate for you. That's part of our job in admissions. Clint, I always joke about this, no matter what our title is, the words boil down to admissions counselors. And we take both of those words very seriously in this admissions and what does that look like, and then counseling you through this process. And maybe it is our university and maybe it isn't, but that's a conversation we can have. I really like how you're talking about the committee and kind of the context of the school.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to remind everybody that as you're thinking about the schools you're applying to while we're going through this presentation, if you're unsure about where a school fits or what they weigh or what type of review they do, ask the admissions rep for those schools. Your counseling staff know everybody very, very, very well. And so they can help get you in touch. A lot of your counseling staff might even know the answer to those questions. But just kind of keep an eye on what might be different from different schools or what might be the same between them as well.
That's a really good point, Clint, that there's a us assigned to Bishop Lynch for every university. So there's a counselor that knows your school, a college representative that's assigned to BL that can answer those questions typically and meet the admissions staff. If you click on the state of Texas or type in the school, you'll be able to see our smiling face. I joke mine was back when I had hair, so you can at least see who we are, have our contact information. So to ask those questions, it's not, we try to make it as easy as possible to find us.
Absolutely. The next part now, we're going to break down holistic review a little bit more. I know that's typically what some of you might think when we talk about what makes a competitive applicant. Are the individual parts of the application, the things that you can put into it to make yourself stronger. And so we'll get into this. Brad, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I talked about the kind of things we look for in your application, and the thing I start talking about with test optional, we'll talk about testing in a second, is this is a terrible analogy, but it's the one I use, and maybe it's just because it's dinner time and I'm hungry, but I think of your application like a pizza, right? So it has your transcript, it has your essay, it has your recommendation, it has your transcript and test scores, right? So if we take test scores out, I can't hand you a pizza with one slice missing. So everything else becomes a little bit more important. Um, it, the with all the data, and all of us college reps love to nerd out on this stuff, that the number one indicator of a student's success in college is their high school GPA. And that's based on their school and the amount of rigorous classes that they're taking within the context of your school. And typically how you end high school is how you start college. What I mean by that is if there's a blip on your transcript sophomore year and we have this upward trend, that tends to carry yourself into college. One of the questions we get a lot of, there's some students, I work with students in Oklahoma, and there's some students in the full IB program that will come in with about 17 advanced classes. We do not expect that from Bishop Lynch. So don't go signing up for AP German. If you've never spoken German in your life, that's not going to end well. It's the rigor within the context of BL. I don't expect 0 and I don't expect 17, if that kind of makes sense for schools like us. But we like to see the things that you're challenging yourself in the courses that you are enjoying. Before testing, Clint, you want to talk a little bit about that choice of major?
Yeah, absolutely. Each university is looking for something a little different, and one of the things that can come into play for some universities, not all, is your choice of major. It is, sometimes, like for example, the College of Business might only have so many seats. And so if you have a lot of students that you're applying to the College of Business, it can be a little more competitive. Or that major might be looking for something very specific. If you're interested in engineering, they're probably going to look at your physics, your science classes, your math classes. What level did you start at? Do they require calculus? Are they looking for that very specifically? Or, for example, there's a shortage of teachers in the nation right now. So if you're going to be an education major, your academic threshold, that competitive level for you to be admitted to that university might be lower than someone who is doing nursing or pre-med. And so your choice of major can come into play when it comes to your admission or the competitiveness of your application. Of course, again, it varies by each university, right? We're all going to look at that very differently. Some schools, you don't even have to choose your major whenever you're admitted. And so that's something to look into as well.
When we go to the testing slide or the testing box there's a lot of uncertainty with this and new terminology we're literally hearing every day and every year. It's important to ask the university what it's going to be like for your cycle and if we know that. So seniors, most of the universities know if we're test optional and what that means for you. Younger than that, let's see, Trinity, we were in a 3-year cycle. We decided to do another 3-year cycle to kind of gather the data to see how well students are doing without test scores. This will be year 2 of that second year 3 program. So what I'm getting to is ask us. Some of those testing terms, test optional, test flexible, test blind. Clint, I heard one this year, a new one, test expected. That was from a different university. Asking us, what does that mean? And then I would go so far as to ask, what do you recommend, right? So seeing what our middle range is and where you fall within that, how you report those. So some students can self-report through your university portal. Some colleges will take them straight off the Common Application. Trinity does not, but some universities do. So being, again, back to that Google Sheets, being mindful of who's doing what. Asking schools if they superscore SAT or ACT. Clint, you want to talk a little about superscoring?
Yeah, absolutely. And so for those of you who don't know, superscoring is where we take each individual, so let's use the ACT, for example. Say you've taken it 3 times. We will take the highest subscore for each subject, your math, your English, your reading, your science, out of all of your 3 tests to give you a new composite. And so that's a way for us really to try and give you the highest score possible. Some schools will use it for admission. Some will use it for scholarships as well. Some won't use it at all. And so it's important to ask what each school is going to be using. And that's really a trend throughout this entire presentation is, again, each school is going to be different in what they use. And these are the things when we talk about academics. When I say for the University of Tennessee, we put a lot of weight on academics, This is the kind of stuff that I am looking at a little heavier. Your GPA, I don't use class rank, but your GPA, the rigor of your coursework, the trends of how you're doing in high school, the choice of major, but also your test and the rigor of senior year. Some schools will also use your senior year when it comes to their decision. And so it's important to continue that hard work through this year. It's not, oh, I'm admitted and then it's over, or I've completed my application, I can kind of coast through senior year. That's not the case for every school. Some of us will actively use your senior grades for scholarships, for admission, to make sure that that sticks and stuff like that. So it's important to continue working hard this year as well. And with the essay, obviously there's two kind of contexts to look at with the essay. We'll talk about the context of the essay a little bit later, but with this part, when it comes to academics, it's writing ability and preparation. Are you ready for college level writing? Obviously, you're going to Bishop Lynch, and so you are going to be a little bit further ahead than maybe some of your counterparts at public schools across Texas. But that's something that we're looking at as well. We don't expect you to write at a college level yet. You're not a college student, but I do expect you to write like a well-written high school student, right? Like someone who took the classes and paid attention. And so it's not, don't be scared. Don't worry about writing, like it's your senior thesis or anything like that. It's not going to be that crazy, but that's the academic side of the essay.
And most of those essays is truly just effort and time, right? If you take the time to craft this essay, you will be fine. And I don't mean fine, like fine, like it serves the purpose of showing us that you can write an essay. Very few are terrible, and the ones that are terrible really are. The record used to be 6. Now it's 1. It was 6 sentences. This year, a student sent me a 1-sentence essay, and it said something, this is for a class project, so hopefully this serves the purpose. And they were not admitted, and the transcript reflected the effort in the essay. So I say this, that the essay, we like reading them. I read 1,000 of them last year, and it's fun reading your story. And I know your counselors do a fantastic job of walking through some exercises with that. But just know we enjoy reading them.
Absolutely. Next, we're going to talk about the more personal side of the application, those extracurriculars, those parts of the application where you're really kind of showing yourself off. One thing that for you guys to keep in mind as you get to this point, as you begin filling out your application is your chance to advocate for yourself. I know that can be very difficult. Sometimes it's hard to praise yourself. I know when I was going through my application process, it's really hard to think of all the things you do well. It's very easy to think of the things that you don't do very well. But the application really is your time to point out all of those cool things that you do. The things about you, like when it comes to the essay, we talked about the writing, the ability to write the essay. The next part is that this part is about the content. It is about showing your character and personality, even if it's a subject matter that you might think is mundane. I know, Brad, don't you have an example of one it's a pretty mundane essay, but they had a lot of character in it and it stuck with you, right?
What I love about the essay is when you take that time to tell us that story and kind of show your personality. And like you said, one of the hardest things is to brag about yourself. And when you start thinking about your friends, what other people do, we kind of get caught in that of, well, I'm not as good as John, I'm not as good as Tony, so I'm not going to write about anything. We want to see your story, and what you're going to write about, I don't know, and you might not know yet. What I encourage you to do is create a Google Doc that says everything I want colleges to know about me, and just start typing things. And maybe that essay comes through in there, right? Maybe it's one of those stories or one of those things, or maybe that's what your teacher letter recommendation is going to write about. One of the exercises, I'm stealing this from one of my colleagues down in Houston, ask a classmate or a family member these 3 questions. When did I make you laugh the hardest? When were you most proud of me? And when did I surprise you the most? Proud, laugh the hardest, surprise you the most. Why? Because you're going to start to see yourself from another lens. And is that what you write about? I don't know, but that emotion that person who knows you well is what we want to read, right? So that's where that personality comes from. Clint, when you talk about that, one of my favorite ones was she wrote about growing up through the reflection of the mirror at the end of the stairwell. So she had first days of school, she had a homecoming. That's when I learned about mums for the first time. I'm from Arizona, so that's a new thing. Driving tests and having a parallel park, and I remember that. So it was her story through that, but something that was very relatable.
And it doesn't have to be some outlandish, crazy, once in a lifetime story. It really does not have to be that. It just has to be very you. And that is really what we want to get across, is that it has to be very you, because at the end of the day with these applications, we want to see who you are in your daily life. Even if you don't think you have some outlandish story, again, like to share or anything like that, we want to see your character and see your personality through these things. Um, you know, to also show the why. Why are you choosing this particular university? If there's a university that you're really into and it's the one you really want to be competitive for, showing that why. Show that you've done the research around the university, why you want to be there, what makes you excited to be there, why you would be a good fit for that university. Now, some universities will have that specific question as an extra essay. Some universities, that's just kind of what they're wanting you to show through the application. And so it looks a little bit different for everybody, but it's something that we like to see whenever we're reading it. Um, Going next, just kind of like your involvement. I mean, resume, we use resume as kind of a catch-all. Obviously some of you will fill it out on the Common App in that section, and some universities will require a resume. I always recommend having one together whenever you're completing your application, because even if it's not on the list of documents, send it in if you can, because it's a great way for you to have all of your information concise in one place with enough room to really explain all of the things that you want to explain. And so that can be the clubs and organizations that you're a part of, anything work or family related. I know that for me personally, when I was applying for applications, I have two younger siblings. I'm the oldest. I was the first one to have a car. And so for me, my service, my charity, if you will, was driving my siblings to school every day and getting them ready and going to practice, because we all did Olympic development soccer. So we were traveling all the time. And so I didn't have time to do National Charity League or a lot of stuff like that you might think of, because that's what I was doing. I also had a part-time job. And so those are things that it looks very different from everybody, but we want you to share all of that information with us, as well as just your hobbies. What do you enjoy doing? Is it related to the major that you want to do? That's always something that we love to see as well. Um, Skills, we're looking for your skills, leadership skills, the growth over time from being whether it's 8th grade to 9th grade all the way to senior year. The dedication to what you want to do. We say well-roundedness a lot, and really that kind of encompasses all these things together. It's just seeing a student who works hard, who is enjoying the things that they enjoy, and is going to make our university a better place.
And I love how you said, like,
Yeah, go ahead,
it's
Brad.
not what you do, it's that you do something. And we know you're not going to bed at 3 o'clock and waking up at 7 o'clock and then going to school. You're doing these other things, and we want to know what that is. And it's not, I just met a student the other day who's really into farming. That was fascinating hearing about all the stuff he'd grown in his garden. And the student before him, she was into theater, and that was fascinating learning about all the costume designs and all that fun stuff. So it's if you haven't gathered, we're really good at talking to strangers every day and learning about kind of you and your nuances. And we want to hear that story with it. And the leadership, we don't expect as a freshman you to have been the captain or first chair or whatever president of a club or have started something, but we like to see some progression with it, right? I don't know if it's still true. I remember back in the day, UPS, the people who deliver our Amazon packages, you couldn't have a higher role in UPS unless you'd been a driver, right? The idea that how can you tell us what to do if you haven't been on the road doing these things? And seeing that growth and progression with it makes sense. Also, if you stop something, that's okay too. I was a terrible saxophone player, so I did not do it senior year, but it's okay to stop something if you truly don't want to do it, but fill that time with something. Um, I'm going to tie this into recommendations, going to let you take on that, but I was thinking about that resume. What's so nice about having that resume is when you hand it to that teacher or counselor for that letter of recommendation, they may be surprised to see all the other things that you do. You may talk with them, at school and things like that, but when they actually see your resume and the stuff that you do, that may fill in that letter of recommendation.
Absolutely. And when it comes to letters of rec, obviously we're going to ask each university, right, what their requirements are, what they need, if there's a max, if there's a minimum. For us, they're optional. They truly are optional letters of recommendation. We typically encourage academic ones first, followed by character references, because
Mhm.
again, the University of Tennessee highly values academics above everything else. And so in every school is going to look at a little bit different. The one piece of information, or in the way that I would encourage you with your letters of recommendation, is to get one from the teacher or the counselor that knows you the best, not necessarily the class you did the best in. I can see that you got an A in a particular class. I can see that you've done well in an AP class. I know what an AP class entails. And so I know how hard those classes are. But what I can't see is, maybe did you start off at a D or a C and work your way up? Did you ask the teacher questions and really work as hard as you could to bring that up to an A? Were you helping classmates? Were you that student who was always actively involved and really showed your character? Those teachers and those counselors who can speak to your character inside the classroom as well are going to be more valuable to you than a teacher who can simply say, this is how hard my class is and the student did well in it. Because again, that's a part of that academic record that we get to see. And it goes back to having someone advocate for you. Find that person who can advocate for yourself. A lot of times that's also the subject that you do the worst in, right? Because that means you're working harder to do it. For me, that's math. I struggle very hard with math. It takes me a lot of extra work just to get to where some of you might come to it naturally. And so my letter of recommendation came from a math teacher, an AP calculus teacher, because I struggled every single day of that class and I only made a B. But that B, I came to every tutoring session. I even helped tutor other people. I did a lot of extra stuff in that class to make a B, and I was super proud of it. But that's a level of something that they couldn't see just from reading the transcript.
Absolutely. One of my favorite letters of recommendation all time was from a student, similar story, Clint, she was art and music at Trinity, but her letters of rec came from her math teacher, and that was the lower grades on her transcript. I remember thinking, that's interesting. And the letter started, I bet you're surprised to be reading this from me. And I thought, yes, actually I am. I went back to look at the transcript, and he went on to say how hard she worked in that class. Imagine how hard she's going to work on your campus when she's choosing the classes she wants to be involved with, music, theater, and going on to major in both those. And I just love that. I love that it went beyond just the best grade, but that teacher that knows you and that likes you and that can speak well about your grit. One of the things we always say in our admissions committee is, can the student do the work? Can they do the work at our school? And the teacher recommendation lets us know, will you do that work? And that counselor recommendation tells us about who you are in the BL community. What does that look like? What are these other things that you're bringing to the table? So making sure that you're checking in with them and keeping them updated on what you're doing. We know them well, and we know they love hearing your story too and bragging on you also.
Absolutely. Next, we're going to go over something that's kind of a part of the application, but also may not be a part of the application, demonstrated interest. Now, several of you might know this based on some Texas schools here who highly value demonstrated interest. Of course, this is going to look different for everybody in what that looks like. And the first step really, and that's what's important to me a lot, and even to Brad as well, is engagement. And engagement looks very different. Some schools will track you opening emails and track how much you're communicating and reaching out and all of those type of things. But for other schools, it's, are you taking optional steps? Like I mentioned that we have optional letters of recommendation. I have an optional supporting statement. A resume is also optional. Interviews like with Brad for Trinity and things like that. Maybe some schools have interviews that are optional. Are you taking that extra step to do those optional things to show your interest in that university? Much like coming here today, interacting with the admissions rep. I mean, we are here especially when it comes to Brad and I being holistic review universities, we read your application and we make recommendations. Now, unlike some highly selective schools, maybe we're coming at it with a highlighter, not with a red pen. My goal in coming to your application is to find every single reason to admit you. I work for the Office of Admissions, not the Office of Denies. And so it's very important to keep that in mind. But what that means is the more that we get to know each other, the more that I see you, the more that I can put that face to that name, the more I can highly recommend you for admission, and the more that I can advocate for you should that admissions decision in the first round not be as positive as we'd like for it to be. And I mean, that means meeting with us in person or virtually. That means reaching out and asking questions, and saying hello when we come and visit you. When you come to the college fair at Jesuit, or a fair that's at BL, or a high school visit, you can come up and say hi to us, introduce yourself. Again, we work with thousands of students. We read thousands of applications, and so it can be tough sometimes to remember exactly who a particular student might be. But I promise, the more we communicate and the more that you come and talk to us, the more I'm going to remember. And sharing your interest with the rep. It's one thing to be involved, but it's another thing that if I'm a school or Trinity's a school or there's another school that is your top choice, that is where you want to be, is sharing that. Because there are lots of students who will fill out the application and fill out everything involved simply because it's checking a box, because that's what they believe they have to do, but they haven't shown any additional interest in the university itself. And so if I have two students who are of equal application, they're both competitive in the same way, and one of them has really showed me that this is where they want to be, I am so much more likely to want to admit that student, because I know you and I know that you want to be here.
Absolutely. I struggle with that phrase, demonstrated interest. And I say that I can't gauge how interested you are, right? And you applied it to our university. There's clearly some interest. How interested, I don't know. But engagement, I can put some factors to that, just like Clint talked about. And yes, we can track, have you opened emails? How many have you opened? And I know you all are getting so many emails. And that's why I love a presentation like this that tells you, I know you're getting a lot of information just pushed at you, but that's where, if you asking us the things that matter to you, let us know. The admissions interviews typically are this summer into the fall of your senior year. I think some universities maybe do juniors, rarely though. It's typically now. The first 2 weeks in September is going to be crazy with all the universities coming through BL and all the college fairs. So you can it's only going to ramp up with that. A lot of us will do them virtual too, so take advantage of that. If it's anything good with COVID, it's virtual interviews and our online campus visits with that. To the visiting campus, thinking about the things that are important to you. What about high school, Dallas, DFW, Texas? Do you want to mimic, and what do you want to be different, right? And those are the things. If you love boba tea, how many places near the campus have that? If you love going to the movies or the theater or whatever the thing you like to do is, how far is that from the campus, so that we can, those are things we can help you with, right? To get a feel of what do students do outside of campus. And then, we can talk about study abroad and things like that later, but I'm thinking of, as you're exploring the city, learning what's there for you, talking about internships and things like that. But I do think that's an important part when you're visiting the campus. When you do visit the campus, let us know you were there. Even if it's not for an official tour, back to that demonstrated engagement, you may not check in with admissions because it's during a weekend or whatever, but saying, hey, Brad, I was on your campus, no one was there, but I walked around and saw some friends from BL and they showed me the dining hall. Wow, that's cool. That lets us advocate for you again, to be able to say, oh, they know our campus and know a couple students. So I think that's an important part.
Yeah, and I would say please don't assume with every university that a campus visit is mandated to show your interest, right? Because I know a lot of us, there are 4,000 universities in the country. Some of them are in your backyard, and a lot of them, like me, are very far away. And so, while some universities will track your campus visits to show interest, a lot of us don't. And so it's important for you to understand that, to ask your rep and to see what do they value when it comes to demonstrated interest. Obviously I want you to come see campus, because that can be, like Brad said, one of the biggest factors in you choosing what place fits you the best, because that really is, that's your home, not only for in class, but outside of it. Your home for at least 4 years, if not more, if you decide to do more schooling or anything like that with that university. But like for us, I understand that I'm far away, and so I don't hold that against you if you're unable to visit. But some schools might, and so it's important to kind of understand how they use campus visits, or if they use them at all when it comes to your interest. The last
That's
one
a
on here,
great point.
community. Yeah, go ahead.
I think that's a great point, that there are students. I'm thinking of Trinity. I just looked at our visits that visited yesterday, a year ago, yesterday, and that was the only time they would have visited our campus till they decided to come May 1st. And then there were students, the only time they visited was April 30th. So to your point, Clint, it doesn't matter when. We'll have some that never visit, but for the most part, it doesn't matter when. And just know we can help tailor those things for you if it makes sense to.
Absolutely. And going back to kind of tailoring a little bit, that goes to the community connections. As you visit or as you become involved with a university in the application process, involved with us, like we said a few slides ago, doing your research with the university and your why is getting connected to that university's community, that campus community with them. That can be current students. A lot of universities, pretty much all universities, have student ambassadors, the people who are the tour guides. A lot of departments across these campuses will have students that you can talk to. alumni in your area, getting with them and showing your interest. And a lot of times those alumni associations may recommend you to us and let you know, hey, like I met with this student, they're wonderful. I think they would make a great volunteer. Like please add them to your list. I get those emails all the time from alumni. The same thing goes with faculty and staff. If you are on a campus and you're able to be there, or you reach out to a department because you're interested in a particular thing that they're doing, whether it's a major or a project or something you want to get your hands on when you become a student, those professors and staff really reach out to us. I have, obviously, like I live in Fort Worth, so we're both here in the DFW area, so it's very rare that I'm on campus the same time as you. But if you meet with someone in admissions, someone in our visitor center, a lot of times they will reach out to me and let me know, hey, I met with a student of yours. This is what we talked about. They've shown a lot of interest. I really, really like them. Like, and the same thing goes with faculty as well. And so it's important to take that next step because that also lets you get to know the university a little bit more. Do you feel like you would be supported as a student, whether it's personal or academic or anything like that? And also just to also show your interest in that.
And I love the current students because when you apply to schools and are admitted, there comes a point where you don't want to talk to Clint and I. I know it's true. I know our feelings aren't hurt. You want to talk to students who are living and breathing it. And that's our role too, is if my daughter was coming to BL next year and you all were taking her around, there's things you would show her and tell her, this is how the dining hall works, or this is what this looks like. That's what you would want to do on our campuses. Or if you're not on our campus, talking to students before that. We set up virtual Zoom rooms all the time or email communication. So like back to Clint's point, you don't have to be on our campus to take advantage of these things.
Absolutely. Now, this is kind of switching gears a little bit with the application process. We mentioned choice of majors earlier in the academic section. These are kind of alternative and performance-based programs that might alter your competitiveness within your application. Of course, this varies by university, what programs they have, what resources they have, and what they prioritize. We mentioned engineering or some business schools. I'm sure several of you are going to be interested in those things, and you might know universities where Tennessee, for example, where the engineering program has a secondary review. I admit you to the university, but then the College of Engineering has to review you for admission to that. They have different requirements. They might have higher standards. Nursing schools are often a very common one among students. They might have a secondary review process, and they might have more limited space. And so even though you're a competitive student for the university, the competitive level might look different for some of these different programs. The next step with that is also performing majors. If any of you are interested in music, theater, fine arts, band, I know Brad's example is always the oboe, right? If anybody plays the oboe, there are so few people in the country that play the oboe that a lot of music programs will pay for your school to come and play for the oboe, right? Or like for us, if you are a competitive member of the Pride of the Southland, the marching band, then these programs will strongly advocate for you on their behalf because they want what you bring performance-wise. You are getting, like he mentioned with that student who wants to do music and theater, that's a very different skill set than a student who's just coming for your more traditional academics. And so because of that, your academic threshold might be a little lower than the student who's doing business or engineering. Because at the end of the day, what will make you successful in your major isn't that you got an A in pre-calculus, but that you have the skills to be on stage for the theater program, or you are proficient in your instrument to play music or be in the band.
And depending on university, there may be an opportunity for a scholarship, and the time commitment could vary drastically. So again, I know Trinity, where for our music majors, you do not have to be a music major to have a music scholarship or participate in ensembles. So to be part of the music department, you can just play the oboe, and it's somewhere 2 to 6 hours a week is the commitment, depending on season ensemble. And other institutions, it's more than that, and there's also different opportunities for that don't exist at Trinity. So I'm not saying one's better than another, but just as you're exploring this, knowing that may be an opportunity. Debates usually another one that is kind of in that fine arts thing with that. Athletics, I spent 11 years coaching college women's basketball. It was a long time ago, but I know this one, that as you're talking to coaches or thinking about athletics, that's where your counselors will come in real handy. Being able to know at what level what does that look like? Most of my knowledge was Division III, where we didn't offer athletic scholarships. But I'll tell you what, the second year coaching, we won the Division III national championship. And the only thing different than our trophy than UConn's that year was 2 Roman numerals, right? So you can still continue your sport if that's something you want to do, but definitely getting in touch with the coaches and getting on their radars as soon as possible is always my recommendation. And just because you're getting communication from the university doesn't mean you're getting communication from athletics. So just making sure that you have all of that connected. And obviously it's different for Division I and II with the scholarships, but just knowing that that's how that plays out, I think is really important.
Right. And just understanding that it's just going to look different. The whole process will look different than, as Mr. Ringett's putting in the chat, your college knowledge night about athletic recruiting is next month. It's just that process is just going to look different than a student who's not doing athletics, which means your academic threshold may be a little different than a traditional student's, regardless of your major. The last one on here we put is ROTC or a military-based program, whether it's Air Force, MROTC for the Marines, Navy, whatever the university you're looking at does. If you're doing that, a lot of times they have very specific scholarships, very specific requirements. And if you're heavily recruited or much like a performance-based major, if you're recruited by an ROTC, again, what you need to be competitive for the university might look a little bit different, because at that point you're trying to be competitive for ROTC, not necessarily for the university. Like I have a particular student who's coming from the DFW area who is on the lower end of as you look at our middle 50%, he's in our lower 25%, but he is an ROTC candidate through and through, and that's what he's doing. And he was admitted because that's what they advocated for him. They wanted him in their program, and that's something like that. Same thing goes with music. We have the exact same thing. And so these are all kind of alternative and different ways to look at it, different scenarios based on what your major could be or something that you're interested in, just to let you know that outside of the traditional application process you find at a university, there are situations and scenarios that might look a little bit different for all of you. And so again, this comes back to asking us questions. If you're interested in something very specific, please let us know so we can help guide you through that. This is the last one here kind of on our little catch-all is going to be application deadlines. And while this isn't the case for every university, for a lot of universities, the deadline by which you can apply shows your interest. It shows the likelihood in which you're going to come. It also can increase the chances of your admission based on it. And I'm sure your counseling staff will go over this stuff if they haven't already with you guys a little bit more detail. For you that are juniors, sophomores, freshman students, you'll hear more and more about this as you come through high school. We'll start with early decision. For those of you who don't know, that is contractually binding. You are signing a form saying, I will come, if I'm admitted, I am coming to this university regardless of financial aid, regardless of major. And so for some schools, usually your highly, highly selective schools, this may be your biggest chance of getting admitted, depending on your application, because you have to show up. And so it's important to kind of keep that in mind. You must attend that university. You then withdraw if you're admitted with early decision, you will withdraw your application from all your other schools. But this is something to consider as you're looking at the schools you want to apply to. If you're someone who is very interested in the highly selective schools who use early decision, it's important to thank you, Mr. Ringett, put in the chat that UT and A&M don't offer early decision. So keep that in mind. But one thing that if you're looking at schools that do offer early decision, it's talking with your counseling staff to determine, is that the best fit for me? Is applying to this early decision going to be the best fit? Because should I get admitted, then I have to withdraw from everywhere else. Now, we use this here to let you know that for some of those schools, it could be the highest chance for admission. And then we kind of move into, and I'll let Brad kind of take this one, about early action, which is kind of what you'll more commonly see across a lot of the universities that you apply to.
And I like to put families at ease that a student cannot accidentally apply early decision. That form that Clint was talking about has to be signed by the student, a family member, and the counselor. So while the student may click it and not know, you're not bound till that happens. A couple years ago, Trinity, we did a button on our website for an early financial estimate. So if families are thinking about early decision but don't know if the finances are going to work, we basically get a financial aid package to you before clicking that button. We're not the only school that does that, but I think that helps kind of that, not hoping that the numbers are right, but at least knowing what that looks like. I highly, highly recommend going early action to the schools that offer it. It's not early decision where you're committing, it's early action. Think of it as early notification. Reasons why you would not apply early action is if you had a blip on your grades second semester junior year, and we wanted to see that strong first semester senior year, I could see that. Or if you were going to test again for schools that required it. Other than that, I see no reason why students wouldn't do early action. And again, I yield to your counselors who can look at you specifically. Typically, it's an earlier deadline, November 1st, October 15th, somewhere in there. So sometimes it's that students haven't thought about it, and that's why they choose to go regular decision. I would pivot away from that and go to early action. Typically, that's a higher acceptance rate. Awesome. Yeah. Typically, that's a higher acceptance rate. It's more students are there. Yeah, you're getting first crack at kind of the scholarships, at honors options and things like that that schools have. That regular decision, there's another one in here called rolling admissions, where basically every 2 weeks decisions are kicked out. So you apply to a school, 2 weeks later, you're going to get a decision. I could see doing that at a school to at least know there's a school. Great. Please know that so schools like Trinity, November 1st, you find out December 15th, we don't like you less because we haven't got you a decision versus a rolling admission school. It's just every school does that, again, a little bit different. That regular decision, we've seen some students who maybe were deferred from other schools or denied, and then kind of regular decision pool, or students that were just late. There have been students who applied regular decision on September 1, and we will communicate saying, you sure you don't want to switch to non-binding early action and still no movement. It's the last group to be reviewed. It's our last deadline. For us, it's definitely the lowest acceptance rate. By then, everyone's in the pool and all the applications are in, and it's hard.
It can be, yes. And I think it's important to also, and one thing I didn't put on here with early action along with honors and scholarships are also sometimes competitive programs. Some, like for our College of Nursing, you have to apply by early action to be considered for them because they make their decisions by December 15th when we release all of ours. With regular decision, sometimes it's a student who might not have thought about a school until after early action deadline, and that's okay. If you run into a situation where, you're really considering a new school and it's regular decision, go ahead and apply. We'll go over some decisions here in just a minute, but as you'll find, some of these processes and the decisions are fairly flexible and can be very fluid. And so it's a process that can change. And so even if, don't leave these saying I have to apply early action or it's nothing. I have regular decision students who are admitted. It's just typically the least chance because, again, we have already admitted one whole group of students for early action.
And back to that initial, right, Clint, that if you are going by decision and you go and you sit in and Tony says, hey, blank university is awesome. I know I missed early action, but they have an RD. Reach out to the counselor. Hey, I just found out about you late. This is awesome. And that's where we can advocate for you so you're not lost in that kind of sea of RD students. Now, to your point, Clint, some schools may only have early decision, regular decision. So knowing what schools have, if there is an early action option, that may make the most sense.
Absolutely. We have about 10 minutes left, so we'll go through this next slide pretty quickly. Well, I guess we skipped that one. We went or removed it.
For questions.
I guess, yeah. So I guess we'll have time for questions. So yeah, this is, if you haven't put any in the chat, please put it in the chat. If I know Mr. Rangett has any, then we can certainly talk about it as well. But yeah, any questions for Brad or myself?
Brad, there's one question that when we were so Brad and I one time sat on a college knowledge night panel when it was a completely different format before I was even working at BL. And he asked one of my favorite questions I'm pretty sure it was you that asked this question, Brad, about the 3 events that when you're on a campus to ask. Can you relay that question to the students left?
Yeah, when you're visiting these campuses, what are the 2-3 can't miss days on that campus? No matter how sick you are or whatever happens, you can't miss those days. And I think that speaks to the personality and vibe of the campus, and you can see if that meshes with what you're interested in. I used to coach at Carnegie Mellon, and one of those days I know is Carnival. So the campus shuts down and There's a whole carnival literally for the weekend. There's a Ferris wheel. It's amazing. There's this buggy race. So think like bobsled, but there has to be a person in it, and the engineers come with this, and you have to go through all the part of Pittsburgh with it. So it's a pretty neat day. And if that's something that interests you, awesome. For Trinity, I'd say it's your birthday. You get thrown in the fountain of your birthday. Everyone celebrates your birthday. So that's definitely a day you don't want to miss. If it's in the summer, you get your half birthday. Clint, what's a day on your campus?
I mean, there are several. When you get there, you don't want to miss Torch Night. It is your first week on campus, and every single first year student gets together, and you all light our academic mascot is the torchbearer. Um, one who holdeth the torch, shadoweth oneself to lend light to others. And that is the mascot, and that is the motto across the University of Tennessee. And so that is where all the first year students come together to become a part of the volunteer family. And so that is something that you don't ever want to miss. You never want to miss it. And of course, being the University of Tennessee, you never want to miss a game day if you can help it.
That's awesome.
So we did have a question.
Yeah.
Did you want to address it, Clint?
Yeah, sure. Just so everybody can, if you can't see it or anything like that, they asked how important is it to see aspects of someone's major in their application aside from blatantly stating the desired major. This is something that can be very different across universities. We mentioned earlier with like the academic side and the characteristic side is showing that interest, showing the things that you love to do or involved with. I know the easiest major example for me is business, right? Because there are a lot of students who choose business as a major, but everybody's choosing it for a very different reason. For some students, you're involved in business classes, you're in an organization or a club at school, you have your own side business, things like that. Those are things that, for my university in particular, I love to see, because again, that comes down to, will you be able to do the coursework once you get here? And part of it is also comes down to, is this something that you truly are wanting to do? And so it varies by university. I know Brad will chip in here with this one as well, but for me, it's very important to see something like that.
And Trinity will be a little different in schools like us because we're not admitting by major, right? And you're technically not declaring your major till second semester sophomore year. So while all 650 first years could be engineers, you're not. You could be. When I think back to high school, I knew 5 professions: doctor, teacher, lawyer, businessman, engineer. Maybe professional athlete, but that wasn't in the cards. You see my chemistry grades, doctor's out. You see my physics grade, engineer's out. So some people default to these other business or other things. It can be fun at a university to explore these other majors that you may not know it existed. I was a communication major. When I was your age, I didn't know that existed. I've seen students do urban studies, international studies, philosophy, just all these other things, and gone on to have amazing careers that aren't necessarily related to their major. I've seen our engineers get jobs with PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I've seen computer science people get jobs with Whataburger. So they don't always have to make sense, but it's nice to at least know what you're thinking and why.
While we go on to the next question, because there's another one, I'm going to pull it and go ahead and and of course Brad's photo's missing. That's what we talked about with hair. That's what he used to look like with hair, because he's never had hair, right? And so thank you, Google Slides. But so just while we're answering questions, here's our contact information. If you do want it, please take it down so you can ask us questions. I see my good buddy Hamilton in the chat. Asking, what are some commonly used essay topics that lose your interest immediately? Brad, do you want to start with that one?
There are common ones we read. Sports injury, mission trip, things like that. I will never tell a student what they can or cannot write about. What I would encourage you to do is, 2 years ago, I read the best mission trip essay I've ever read, and it was fantastic. She talked about how she really wanted to go. She did a PowerPoint because her dad was the last one to approve it, and it wasn't about the broad stroke of the mission trip. It was the one child that she had that impact with, and the week with this student, and how impactful that was. It was brilliant. So I think it's not that there's a common one. I mean, you all are roughly the same age. There's only so many major events you could have had, but how it impacts you, that's the part that's different. And that's usually, kind of to your question, the biggest miss is giving us You have 650 words giving us 300 words of backstory when we just need 50, and then tell us how it impacted you. That would be my advice with it.
And I completely agree. Again, like I don't again, much like the experiences that you share in your resume or things like that, I don't expect everyone to have a crazy story, a once in a lifetime story. And there are a lot of things, there are a lot of common things that are shared across you all as students, whether it's a sports industry, injury mission trip, those of you that are captains on your sports team or things like that, or involved in some sort of competition. These are things that we see across a lot of students as we read, thousands of applications. And at the end of the day, it is how you can turn what is a fairly common topic to you personally and
Mm-hmm.
really make it unique to you. And that is probably the harder thing to do, I think, than to think of a more, a crazier topic. It is turning something that you might feel is mundane or that we might read all the time into something that is very interesting. I know that one of my favorite essays was a student who wanted to be a computer engineer, and the essay itself was very much, when I was a kid, my parents got me this game console. I think it was a PS2. And we played it so much, and after a few years, we had it for 10 years, and then it broke one day. Well, we couldn't afford a new one, and so I learned. I took it apart and I learned, asking my friends and my teachers, how to fix it, and that showed me how to be a computer. This is what I wanted to do, and that's how this really simple thing changed my life. And so it's not a crazy topic. It's not something wild and outlandish. It's something very common that happens to any of us who have ever had a video game console that is broken. The only problem is I'm not good enough to fix mine. And so it's really just taking that common topic and turning it into something about yourself.
I love that. Well said.
All right, I have one last question for you guys. Think back to when you were high school students. What is one piece of advice that you wish you would have had, or maybe you did have it, that you know now in the roles that you have?
You want to start or you want me to?
If you're ready, you go.
Okay. Um, and it's kind of a two-parter. The first thing that I wish someone would have told me was that with the admissions process, it is entirely about you. The whole thing is, it's not about your family, where your parents want you to go. It's not about where your family went. It's not about where your classmates are going. It's entirely about you finding the university, the college that truly fits you as a person, you as a student, who is going to bring you into that next stage of life. And so taking all that background noise out as you look at these schools and as you see and ask these questions and figure out, okay, this one has what I need, this one doesn't. And it's truly all about you. The other part of it really was that as you start receiving decisions, just because your decisions are different from a classmate's, or they're not what you might have hoped for, or they are what you hoped for, it doesn't make you any more or less valuable than any other student. I got denied to my top two schools and I found my place that has changed my life and became the best fit for me. And sometimes that's the way it tends to work. Whether you're denied from the university you really want to go to, you're deferred or waitlisted, and you're admitted later, you take an alternative pathway. If you're denied or waitlisted from a school that you thought you might want to go to, but there's this other university that you were kind of thinking about that has shown you a lot of love and has shown you that you would be a good fit for them, then there's your sign. And it's okay that you might receive a different decision than your classmates or someone else that you know, because you're still a valuable student and you're still going to be an impactful person on a campus, whatever campus that ends up being.
I like those. I'm going to go two. One's the boring one. The practical one is be organized, because I am not. This looks great. Down here that you can't see the top of my desk is chaos. So being organized through this process with those Google Sheets, of having track of deadlines, what things are looking like. Each university you apply to probably has their own portal, their own account, keeping track of usernames and passwords, and most importantly, our contact information for every university. I can't tell you how many times I send a student their username and password to get into their account. That's fine. I have no problem doing that, but I'd rather you email me than try and guess it and not figure out that you're missing things. The other one, speaking to high school Brad, is be patient with this. I'm the guy that doesn't go to Whataburger because I know it's going to take way too long, right? It's This is a patient process that just takes time of finding your school, applying to the school, finding financial aid, visiting, does it feel like a fit, and then making that decision. It's going to take time. It's not about enrolling today. Today's about exploring and having fun seeing these schools. One of the things in the chat was interview questions. And I think that goes to college campuses too. One of my favorite interview questions a student asked was, what's a day you would relive? If you got teleported back to campus and you could pick any day from freshman to senior year, what's a day you would relive? And then another one is, what types of students are successful? I think those two will help paint a picture of that. And that's not just an interview, but at our college table, that will help you with this deciding. I think of the picking your college, I'm thinking back to sports, of like my draft board, right? That you should have a list of, I don't know, maybe let's call it 8 to 10 right now. Do you apply to 8 to 10? Probably not. Maybe 5, 6. Tony knows the number more than I do. But deciding, there should be a couple. I mean, we all talk about finding your fit. And I'm a big believer in that. And I use socks, again, a terrible analogy, I know. There's lots of socks that fit you. And right now you're trying to find that fit. It's not till May 1st that you find your match. The other one you put on the other foot. So you have time with this. Clearly I'm projecting, Clint.
Brad and Clint, I'd like to thank you guys so much for joining us tonight and presenting on this topic. I hope it's been beneficial to the students that are here. Some of our seniors that have listened to College 101, you have probably heard us say quite literally the same things. It's funny because when it comes to the essays, and I know I put it in the chat, but we go into all the junior classes spring semester for English and give the same. We probably heard it at TACAC at the same time, Brad.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it.
But if you guys ever have any questions, please come see Miss M or myself. Freshmen and sophomores, we really start meeting with juniors, but you're welcome to stop by and see us. Parents, if you're on the call, you're welcome to shoot us an email. Email is always the easiest way with us. We also work really closely with your counselors, so we kind of take a teamwork approach to that. So we're certainly here to help you in this process. We know it can be stressful, but at the end of the day, we want to make sure that it's as less stressful as can possibly be. So thanks so much for joining us, everyone.